If you die without a will, without a plan for how your assets get passed down, the government will make one for you. If you don't like the sound of that, don't worry. We're going to talk about how to fix that. Depending on which survey you look at, around less than half of Canadians have a will. And even for those who do, it's not uncommon for it to be out of date. I see that all the time with clients. Making a will is very easy to put off. I've done it myself. You're paying out of pocket for something that feels kind of abstract for a benefit that you'll never personally see, right? And sitting down and spending time to think about it or finding the professionals to help you out can just kind of feel like a chore as opposed to something you feel compelled to get done, even if it is very important. Naturally, the next question is, should you do it yourself? Can you even do it yourself? Or should you go and see a lawyer, how it's been done forever? The honest answer is it really depends on your situation and where you are in life. So on its face, I don't really have a strong preference either way. I've seen them successfully done for using a do-it-yourself option or, going and seeing a lawyer. That's probably the more common option that I've seen. But again, I'm repeating myself, but the best option depends on your individual situation. I kind of like to compare it to doing your own taxes. If all you've got is a T4, an RSP slip, then a do-it-yourself tax software is built exactly for that kind of situation. It's fast, inexpensive, and it gets the job done. You can file your taxes, no problem. But the moment you add a business, rental properties, family cottage, or any kind of complexity, things start to become a little bit more complicated, and the cost of making an error on your tax return can outweigh the cost of having someone help you do them. This is really no different with wills and estates. The do-it-yourself option has become, a real thing over the last 10 years. They'll walk you through a series of questions to help you create a will and powers of attorney. And last I checked, the price starts sort of around $100 to $200 and will basically go up there. So very affordable. And for a lot of people, it's genuinely sufficient, right? Like these platforms are designed to capture the largest share of people who need a will, which means they're built for fairly simple situations. But the reality is most people have fairly simple situations. So like if you know who you want things to go to, your family situation is straightforward, your investments consist of some RSPs, TFSAs, maybe you have a home, maybe you don't. An online will can handle that type of situation pretty well. The only case against these types of online platforms is they can only work with what you give them. So they're going to ask questions, but they can't tell you which questions you should be asking. There's no one in the room flagging potential issues or tax implications specific to your situation. And if you misunderstand a question or answer something incorrectly, the documents may not reflect what you actually intended. I think these platforms actually do quite a good job of handling that issue, though, because many of them offer free edits or updates, but that can always change. Going back to that point, most people have fairly simple situations, and so these consequences probably won't materialize, right? For a lot of people, going and seeing a lawyer feels like a bit of a bridge too far. First, you've actually got to find a lawyer that you like. That could mean meeting with a few. It's another appointment to book, and you go and you're not sure what you're going to be paying for. Am I paying just to talk to you, or do I only pay you once this wills and power of attorney get done? Right? It's kind of uncomfortable. And if the real choice for you is between doing nothing and a DIY option, then, the DIY option is an absolute no-brainer. Something in writing is infinitely better than having nothing at all. So going and seeing a lawyer, right? The obvious things that probably everybody already knows is seeing a lawyer costs more money than the do-it-yourself platforms, right? The prices for the will and power of attorney typically aren't published on a lawyer's website, but from experience, I would say somewhere in the range of $500 to $1,500 for a basic will. And then there's additional costs to do the powers of attorney. And there's going to be more costs if it's a more complicated situation, requires more nuanced documentation, and requires more conversation to determine what the appropriate setup should be. And I think the big thing, going and seeing a lawyer, like sometimes people will say, well, if I got the documents here versus a lawyer made it, like it's obviously cheaper. Aren't they going to be the same documents? And, yeah, they're the same types of documents. But when you go and see a lawyer, I view it as what you're actually paying for is the legal advice, right? Not just the document generation. So a good lawyer is going to get to know your situation, right? They're going to ask things you hadn't thought to even ask, and they're going to spot issues before they become issues. So for example, you go and see a lawyer, you have a rough idea, you've jotted down some thoughts of what you want. You say, I want this and this and this to happen. And the lawyer will go, okay, but what is it that you're actually trying to achieve here? Because if your goal is to achieve, this over here, here's a better way to do it. And here's why. And they'll walk you through and explain it to you, right? And if you're fully DIYing, you're not getting that kind of advice. And that's what you're paying for. When you DIY, the documents are going to be more generic. And with a lawyer, your documents are built around the nuances of your specific situation. Again, this assumes that you need documents that reflect all of those nuances. I think that's why a lot of people are migrating to some of these DIY software, because they don't have very nuanced situations, and that's okay. That's what those DIY platforms are designed to do. They're designed to provide a solution to the majority of people, and most people have simple situations. So again, coming back to the tax software analogy, at some point, if your taxes become too complicated, the costs of paying someone to do your taxes are far less than the cost of you making a mistake. And I think there are some specific situations where you would really want to see a lawyer to make sure that all of your documents are set up properly and to achieve the best result. Because getting these types of situations wrong can cost you a lot more than whatever the cost would be to pay the lawyer up front. So those would be a child with a disability, right? If your child receives government benefits, then a poorly structured will can inadvertently disqualify them. You want someone who is going to be able to spot this ahead of time and recommend the appropriate solution. A child dealing with a substance addiction, right? In these cases, you may want to control how and when they receive their inheritance rather than receiving a lump sum, right? A lawyer can set up distributions in a way to protect your child while reflecting that you still want to give them something. Same idea, spendthrift children. If you have a child who you know will burn through an inheritance quickly, again, you can set things up so that they get it over time as opposed to all at once. Blended families, second marriages, stepchildren, obligations from a previous relationship, the competing interests can get complicated fast. The stakes are high here. This is not the place to cut corners. Estates involving corporations or trusts. If you've got a business, holding company, your estate plan and your corporate structure need to work together. Getting this wrong can be very costly. I've seen this one firsthand. And so the last one would be real estate beyond your primary residence. So this would be a rental property or a family cottage. These come with their own tax implications and often significant family dynamics in the case of the cottage. Who gets it? Does everyone want it? Who wants to pay to maintain it? These conversations need to happen, and the legal documents need to reflect the outcome of those conversations. I think the other thing that people forget is that an estate plan is a living, breathing thing. It changes as your life changes. You don't just make a will and powers of attorney once and set it and never come back to it. If you set it up 10 years ago and what you set up 10 years ago still makes sense today, then that's great. But you want to have a look at these and just make sure they make sense probably every year or two, or whenever there is a significant change in your life. So we can break this down by life stage and, just think about the things that someone at each stage of life would be thinking about with respect to their will and estate plan. So, first is in your 20s, right? Like you're renting, you don't have any real dependents, no major assets. You could almost make the case for not having a will. And actually, the research here suggests that many young people don't have a will. So I know before that I said, less than half of Canadians don't have a will. And the majority of that is for people, that are in their younger years. As you get older, it's a lot more common for people to have a will. And I mean, honestly, who can blame them, right? If you feel like, hey, there's not really any financial or impact on any dependent. If I pass away, why am I going to go shell out a few $100 to get a will done? I mean, I get that. But if you fast forward a little bit, you're in your 30s, you have a partner now, you're still renting, but you have a dog. Who's going to take care of the dog if you both pass away? These are the kinds of conversations that you probably want to start having and thinking about if you want to work towards having a really well thought out estate plan. And then from there, the next stage, now you've got a starter home, right? Things are going well at work. You've got some savings. Maybe you've got a kid or you've got a kid on the way shortly. And at this point, maybe your trusty dog is getting a little bit older. Things are getting bigger fast. Do you have life insurance to cover the mortgage if something happens to you? Are the right people named as beneficiaries on your accounts? The obvious big item here, again, not financial, but much more important than anything financial, is if something happens to you and your partner, who's going to take care of the child, right? Is it your partner's family? Is it your family? Is there some other arrangement? Like, what's going to happen? Those are things that can be set out within your will. So while at this stage, again, I'm repeating myself, maybe you don't have a lot of financial means that you need to deal with, but you have a very important issue of what's going to happen to your dependents if you pass away. And then from there, I think we kind of get into the stage where people start thinking about estate planning, right? You're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you're in your peak earning years. Now there's some money that you've actually accumulated. Maybe along the way you started a business. There's more investment accounts or they're bigger. There's more real estate. And this is when people start to think, gee, what's going to happen to all this stuff if I pass away? And this is when most people really start to think about estate planning. But notice we went through kind of a few different stages there, and money only became the main driver, in that last one, a little bit in the third one, but really only in the last one. The other items along the way, which can carry you through to your 40s and 50s, is a lot more of the qualitative stuff, right? Like what's going to happen to your dependents, whether that be pets or kids. That stuff is very important to plan for. It's not just money, right? And that's the reason to start to think about these things ahead of time. The last thing that I want to leave you with is, in my view, the most important part of estate planning isn't necessarily having your wills and powers of attorney signed and written. But don't get me wrong, that is enormously important, right? But the most valuable thing that you can do is have these conversations with your partner, with your family. What do you want? Who you trust, right? And what your wishes actually are. The document formalizes those sorts of decisions. The thinking, the talking, the planning, that's where the real work happens, and it doesn't cost you anything.